The sunlight at 30,000 feet was sharp against the window. Below, the vast expanse of the continent finally gave way to a brilliant blue coastline. The flight would be landing in New York shortly. Liam, who had slept for most of the journey, stretched with a yawn and took the screenplay from Caleb's lap. He asked lazily if Caleb was ever going to finish filming his part. The question broke Caleb's concentration. He surfaced from the world of his character and confirmed that he was almost done. Anyone who had ever worked on a set knew that most of the job was waiting. Waiting for the right light, for the set to be dressed, for the blocking to be finalized. For a minor actor like Caleb, there was also the endless waiting for his scenes to be called. This was why, even with his role technically unfinished, he had ample time to accompany Liam to New York Fashion Week. Liam flipped through the script dismissively. He tossed it back onto Caleb's lap, stating that he didn't want his boyfriend playing a construction worker, either on screen or off. The thin script, filled with more handwritten notes than actual lines, landed softly. Caleb was used to this refrain and simply let the comment slide, murmuring his agreement. Early October in New York was crisp, a cool breeze still carrying a hint of summer's warmth. The streets were swarmed with media for Fashion Week, a forest of cameras and lenses at every corner. Aspiring celebrities and influencers were everywhere, making it seem as though the main event was not the fashion itself, but the stars vying for attention. With only 10 minutes until Aura's spring-summer show, Liam's outfit was still undergoing last-minute adjustments. His voice was sharp as he barked orders, telling people to stay out of his way and demanding his vlog be shot from a flattering angle. He anxiously asked if the social media hashtags were ready. It was his first time being invited by a major luxury brand to walk in a show, and both he and his team were green. The designer frantically tweaked the feathers on his garment while a hairstylist darted in to tame a stray lock of hair. The small artist's tent was a chaotic, crowded space. Caleb was the only one with nothing to do. Feeling entirely out of place, he decided to leave the tent and step into the backstage area of the show. The Aura show was divided into 4 segments, each culminating with a celebrity model. Liam was one of them. When he first received the invitation, he had excitedly told Caleb how famous the other 3 were, boasting that walking alongside them would elevate his status far above his rivals back home. Caleb hadn't paid much attention and had since forgotten their names. So when he saw the nameplate Julian Z on the tent next to Liam's, it didn't ring a bell. The show started over 20 minutes late, but no one in the audience complained. Caleb watched the proceedings on a monitor backstage. He had to admit, a top-tier fashion show was visually stunning. Models streamed out, all impossibly tall and long-limbed. Avant-garde designs that might have seemed bizarre elsewhere looked perfectly sensible here. As the first segment, featuring a dozen looks, drew to a close, it was Liam's turn. Dressed in all black, his expression severe, he walked to the beat of the music and struck a pose at the end of the runway. While not a professional model, his 6'2" frame and handsome face held their own. Members of the American press who had been invited applauded politely. Caleb pulled out his phone and started recording the screen. No one would pass up the chance to capture their partner's moment in the spotlight. The entire show lasted about 40 minutes. Once Liam was off the stage, Caleb's attention drifted. He wasn't particularly interested in fashion, and his enthusiasm for the show waned. Just as his gaze shifted back to his phone, a collective gasp went through the backstage area. He looked up. The 4th segment was on, and the man closing the show was dressed in white trousers, his torso nearly bare except for a few uniquely designed silver chains. The man had distinct Asian features, yet they were blended with something else. His eyes were deep-set, his nose high-bridged. He possessed the cool remoteness of a Scandinavian and the bold structure of a Latino, a combination that created a face of arresting power. The camera didn't linger on his face for long, instead panning down from his throat to his collarbones, across a well-defined chest and abdomen, before pulling back for a full-body shot. His proportions were flawless. Even through the screen, Caleb was impressed. It was only then that he remembered.
Julian Z.
From the tent next door was Julian Zephyr, a fashion icon even someone like Caleb, who didn't follow the scene, had heard of. His mother was the legendary supermodel Faye Zephyr, and he had grown up in the world of high fashion. He was the godson of a titan in the industry and was a design consultant for several luxury brands. He was even cred with reviving the recently popular fetishcore trend. Caleb understood now that Liam sharing a runway with him was indeed a significant boost to his career. Just as he was thinking this, Liam and Julian returned to the catwalk for the final walk, following the rest of the models. The other two celebrity walkers were women, so there was no immediate comparison when they walked with Julian. Liam, however, was not so fortunate. Walking side by side, though they were of similar height, Julian's broader shoulders and longer limbs made Liam's proportions look painfully average. Even Caleb, his boyfriend, winced slightly and had to look away. After the designer took a bow, the show officially ended. The backstage area filled with models and crew members chatting and mingling. Caleb made his way toward the artist's tent, navigating the dense crowd. Suddenly, his path was blocked by what felt like a wall of warm skin. The wall was shirtless, pale, with familiar silver chains draped over one shoulder. Caleb tilted his head slightly and glanced at the person's profile. It was Julian. He was also heading toward the artist's tents, presumably to change. Caleb thought nothing of it and was about to look away when a small, downy earring slipped from Julian's earlobe. It floated past his shoulder and drifted right in front of Caleb. He instinctively raised his hand, and before he knew it, the earring had landed squarely in his palm. The natural thing to do was to return it. But Caleb was quiet by nature, often feeling like a stranger in his own country. He preferred action over words. He gently tapped Julian's shoulder and held out the earring. Julian turned around. He looked first at Caleb, then down at the earring in his hand, and then his gaze returned to Caleb's face. On the monitor, the camera had moved too quickly for a detailed look. Now, standing so close, Caleb could see that Julian's skin was flawless. His eyes were a light hazel, framed by thick, fan-like lashes. The impact of his face from the screen was magnified tenfold in person. It made Caleb inexplicably think of Aphrodite from Greek mythology. If the goddess of beauty had a physical form, it would surely be of this caliber. Their eye contact lasted only a moment. Aphrodite murmured a thanks and took the earring back from Caleb's hand. Caleb maintained his silence and continued through the crowd back to Liam's tent. By the time Liam had removed his makeup and changed into his own clothes, the afterparty was in full swing. The dance floor was dimly lit, the music deafening. Models and celebrities, their work done, let loose and celebrated. Liam was having the time of his life, acting as though he had been part of this social circle for years, despite it being his first time in New York. Caleb drank alone for a while, feeling bored. He was about to head back to the hotel when Liam reappeared at his side and led him to a smoking area in a quiet corner. Liam had to raise his voice over the music to tell Caleb that Jeff, the aura designer, and his boyfriend had invited them back to their place. Jeff had spent a long time in Liam's tent before the show. Caleb asked when. Liam's reply was immediate. Now. The idea of two gay couples going to someone's home late at night, it was already past 10, suggested only one thing to Caleb. Before he could voice his objection, Liam, seemingly anticipating it, added that they were in a different country and that it was okay to let loose and have some fun. Caleb let out a quiet breath. He took out his pack of cigarettes, his eyes downcast, and reminded Liam that he wasn't into that kind of scene. Liam's patience was wearing thin. He argued that Caleb wouldn't know until he tried, admitting he hadn't either but was willing to give it a shot. Caleb didn't respond. He searched his pockets for a lighter but found none. He asked Liam if he had a light. Liam's brow furrowed. He stared at Caleb, silently urging him not to change the subject. The truth was, Caleb had noticed a growing divergence in their values as Liam became more famous. Early in their relationship, they would both scoff at the sordid stories of the entertainment industry. But gradually, Liam had grown accustomed to it all, now seeing Caleb's reluctance as a sign of naivety. Caleb certainly wasn't as open as Liam. He couldn't even accept the idea of a threesome, let alone a foursome. He couldn't fathom how Liam could suggest it so casually. He put the cigarette back in its pack and stated plainly that he wasn't going. As expected, Liam's face hardened. His criticism shifted from the situation to Caleb himself, returning to their old, tired argument. He asked how Caleb ever expected to make it if he kept acting this way. Here it comes again, Caleb thought, turning his head away with a flat expression. At least they were surrounded by foreigners who couldn't understand what they were arguing about. Liam pressed on, questioning what Caleb had to be so proud of. He belittled Caleb's choice of roles, saying that even a small part in a low-budget web series was better than playing another construction worker. Liam asked if he hadn't had enough of manual labor. Technically, while Caleb's current character was a construction worker, the role involved more than just laying bricks. It was a complex part about a man leading his coworkers to fight for their unpaid wages, who later accidentally kills the project manager. In the legal drama series, it was a fairly significant supporting role. But Caleb knew Liam's dissatisfaction wasn't just about him taking on such marginal characters. It was also about him going to a real construction site to live the part for authenticity. On his days off, Caleb would immerse himself in various professions, observing people from all walks of life. To Liam, this was all meaningless. He thought it was better to network at industry parties than to spend time, both on and off screen, doing what he considered menial work. Caleb understood why their perspectives were drifting apart. They had started their careers at the same time, but now Liam was a rising star with a constant stream of offers, even an invitation from a luxury brand to walk in New York. He had long since lost touch with the struggles of ordinary life. How could he understand why someone like Caleb, with time on his hands, would seek out such experiences? Caleb zoned out, a familiar defense mechanism, which only served to irritate Liam further. Liam demanded to know if he was even listening. He warned that if Caleb continued with his lack of ambition, the gap between them would only grow wider. Unambitious? The accusation almost made Caleb laugh. So now, not wanting to partake in a foursome made him unambitious. He supposed not being famous was the original sin. He finally looked at Liam, too tired to argue, and asked flatly if he wanted to break up. Liam insisted that wasn't what he said, his tone softening slightly. But he confessed that if Caleb kept on this path, his confidence in their future would continue to fade. Watching Liam's retreating back, Caleb leaned against the wall, feeling a profound sense of weariness. He began to seriously contemplate their relationship. He had forgotten he didn't have a lighter. He instinctively pulled out his cigarette pack again, placed a cigarette between his lips, and patted his empty pockets. He gave a small, self-deprecating laugh and took the cigarette from his mouth. Just then, a crisp click echoed in the dim corner. An arm extended from the shadows, offering a flame. It was normal for smokers to share a light. Caleb put the cigarette back in his mouth and leaned in, his eyes lifting casually as he did. The small flame illuminated the corner, and the sight almost made Caleb choke. The person kindly offering him a light was Julian. His deep-set eyes flickered in the dancing light, a hint of amusement in them, as if he were studying Caleb. Caleb straightened up, exhaled a plume of smoke, and managed a calm merci. To his surprise, Julian replied in perfect, unaccented English. "You're welcome." Julian had already finished his cigarette. After retracting the lighter, he didn't linger to chat. The act of sharing a light, much like returning the earring, felt like another insignificant interlude. Caleb was left alone in the corner again. But instead of pondering his relationship with Liam, his mind was now filled with a single question. Why had Julian spoken to him? It wasn't as if they were countrymen meeting abroad. Julian could only have known Caleb was American by overhearing his argument with Liam. Their conversation had been unpleasant and private. Any normal person would have pretended not to understand. Yet Julian had not only failed to feign ignorance, he had made a point of engaging. It felt as if he were silently commenting on the drama he had just witnessed. Given that Caleb's knowledge of Julian was limited to what he'd read online, he spent a considerable amount of time pondering why this beautiful, almost mythical figure would bother. He came to one conclusion: he was simply bored. Or perhaps he just felt like talking. On the flight back, which was delayed due to weather, Liam sat in the private VIP lounge, angrily scrolling through social media. He seethed about the comparisons being made between him and Julian, arguing that it was unfair. He was an actor, he fumed, not a professional model. Caleb had seen the posts too. Someone had circulated the photo of Liam and Julian during the final walk, highlighting their different body proportions with red lines. The hashtag about Liam's poor proportions was trending. In truth, Liam's physique wasn't bad. It was just that Julian's was so exceptionally perfect that it made Liam look short and stocky by comparison. Caleb told him to stop looking at it and went back to browsing casting calls on his phone. Liam put his phone away and turned to Caleb, asking who he thought was more handsome, him or Julian. Without hesitation, Caleb said it was him. It was the expected answer. One was a stranger, the other was his boyfriend. Caleb had no desire to speak his true thoughts and risk another argument. Liam's mood improved slightly. He said he knew it, that his looks were more in line with what people found attractive. Caleb just grunted in agreement. Then, as if remembering something, Liam's anger completely subsided. He mentioned that he had been chosen for the cover of Stance magazine's first issue of the year. Stance was one of the top fashion magazines in the country, a tastemaker for the industry. Landing its cover was a significant achievement for any celebrity. Unlike other magazines, Stance was notoriously selective. A-list status alone wasn't enough. One needed a record of impressive accomplishments and a strong personal sense of style. With Liam's recent endorsement deal with Aura and his role in a blockbuster film that was currently dominating the box office, the invitation from Stance was well-deserved. Caleb offered a sincere congratulations, noting that it was a great accomplishment. He knew these things were a battleground for rising stars like Liam. Liam, pleased, added that the January cover was far more prestigious than any other month. Caleb's interest in topics related to fame and status was minimal. He found most of the things Liam cared about to be uninteresting. So, seeing his boyfriend's mood had lifted, he returned his attention to his phone. Liam, oblivious, continued, asking if Caleb had heard that Stance was hiring a new consultant. Caleb had. Sales for Stance had been declining sharply in recent years. Fashion bloggers had analyzed the magazine's predicament. It was trying to appeal to a local audience without sacrificing its high-fashion prestige, but it was failing at both. The brand's identity had become muddled. In response, the international headquarters was scrambling to find a new consultant. Liam had heard that they had found someone and that headquarters was sending them over directly. Caleb asked casually if it was a foreigner. Liam wasn't sure, but he was certain of one thing. The quickest way to boost sales was to feature more popular celebrities. He predicted that starting next year, Stance would be less strict with its cover choices. Caleb nodded in agreement. As Liam was explaining how the later issues would be less prestigious, his phone rang. He paused his analysis and answered, "Zoe." His agent Zoe's frantic voice came through the phone. She demanded to know if he had been sleeping with Ashley. Liam's brow twitched almost imperceptibly. He glanced at Caleb, who was still focused on his phone, and stepped out into the empty hallway. He admitted it was just once. He asked if he had been photographed. Zoe confirmed that the pictures were crystal clear. She reminded him furiously that he was a top-tier celebrity and that countless eyes were on him. Liam ran a frustrated hand through his hair. He told her to make it go away and to ensure Caleb didn't find out. Zoe said it wouldn't be that easy. His rise to fame had been too rapid, and many people were eager to dig up dirt on him. She took a deep breath, composing herself. If she couldn't suppress the story, she would find another way to handle it. As for Caleb, she told Liam that was his problem to deal with. Liam bristled, asking what she meant. He retorted that if she couldn't handle something like this, what good was she as an agent? When Caleb came out of the lounge to tell Liam it was time to board, that was the sentence he overheard. Zoe was their shared agent, though the company had long since sidelined Caleb, so he didn't know her well. But he knew that before Liam had become famous, he would never have dared to speak to her that way. He walked up to Liam and asked what was wrong. Liam hung up the phone, his expression shifting back to neutral. He said it was nothing and asked why Caleb had come out. Caleb simply told him it was time to board. A few days later, in the Stance magazine office on the 27th floor of the Starlight Tower, Orange Chief Wendy Chun looked as confident as ever in her avant-garde makeup and stylish attire. But the tense atmosphere in the conference room had her sweating. The man at the head of the table tossed a proposal onto the polished surface. His eyes were devoid of emotion. He asked for the special meaning behind their proposed theme for the January issue, Future Tech. Wendy gathered her courage and explained that they thought a tech-inspired concept would suit Liam well. The man's voice was cold as he cut her off, asking if she was saying they chose the person before the theme. Silence descended upon the room. A group of industry veterans, all in their 30s and 40s, sat cowed before the much younger man. Everyone knew he was not someone to be trifled with. The art director, sitting in the corner, discreetly typed a message into a group chat. Confirmed. The new consultant is not an angel. He's a demon. The chat lit up with replies. One person couldn't believe it, remarking on his angelic looks. Another asked what he was like in person, having seen him at the coffee machine that morning and felt their heart race. A colleague from another department joked that their fantasy was shattered. Someone from the beauty team lamented the addition of a demanding boss to their already stressful jobs. But they all agreed on one thing: he was undeniably beautiful. A final message from the beauty director, still in the meeting, warned them all. He just chewed out the Orange Chief. Be careful. In the conference room, the silence was still deafening. Julian leaned back in his chair, his gaze sweeping over the bowed heads of the staff. He said, in what he probably considered a friendly tone, that they were welcome to share their thoughts. Wendy, ever the professional, spoke up. She argued that their research indicated Liam's fanbase had strong purchasing power, and featuring him would give the January issue a strong start. Julian's question was sharp. He asked since when the choice of a stance cover model depended on fan purchasing power. He suggested that if that were the case, they might as well just sell celebrity merchandise instead of publishing a fashion magazine. Wendy, with her years of experience, quickly read the room. She understood that Julian wanted to prioritize artistic content. The current plan was dead. She asked him directly for his ideas. Julian's eyes swept over Liam's headshot in the proposal. He declared that the person had to go. He said his face had no expressiveness. A collective gasp went through the room. Wendy shot a look at her colleagues, silently pleading with them not to let that comment leave the room. Julian continued in a calm, deliberate tone. For the January issue, he wanted to try a style stance had never attempted before. He instructed them to find him faces with character and expression. He would then choose the right person for the cover. Then, a memory seemed to surface. He added, as an afterthought, that they should also bring him the file on Liam's boyfriend. The room fell silent once more. The staff exchanged bewildered glances. After a long moment, someone finally asked, completely lost, if Liam was gay. Another person, equally confused, asked who his boyfriend was. Julian raised an eyebrow. So it wasn't public. He found it hard to understand. Why keep it a secret? Having spent most of his life in Europe, Julian had encountered relatively few Asian faces, to the point where he sometimes had trouble distinguishing between them. But that face had left a lasting impression. The symmetry and proportion of the features were perfect. It was a clean, unadorned handsomeness that was as satisfying to look at as a perfect circle. The only flaw was the man's detached gaze, which made him seem distant and unreadable. When returning the earring, he hadn't bothered to say a single word. Even later, when arguing with his boyfriend, he had seemed languid and disengaged, as if he lacked any real personality or conviction. At the time, Julian had felt a sense of disappointment. A beautiful shell with no interesting soul inside was no different from anyone else. But then, the man had leaned forward to light his cigarette. In the flickering firelight, he had looked up, and in that moment, Julian saw something indescribable in his eyes. It was like a deep, complex story that was being deliberately understated. Julian didn't understand the dynamics of the American entertainment industry or the taboo against celebrities being open about their relationships. He just found it strange. If his own boyfriend were that captivating, he certainly wouldn't mind the world knowing. Leaving the downtown office building during evening rush hour, Julian drove for only 20 minutes before arriving at his rented penthouse at the Apex. The furniture, flown in from Europe, had arrived a few days earlier, transforming the unfamiliar space into a familiar sanctuary. After a shower, he opened a bottle of sparkling wine, set up his sound system, and put on a crime film. He had just gotten to the part where a key character was introduced when a video call from his mother, Faye, came through. She asked him if he was having fun at his new job. He replied that it was all right, pausing the movie and walking over to the floor-to-ceiling windows with his phone. Faye, who was in her walk-in closet selecting an outfit for the day, relayed a message from Bruce, telling him not to feel too much pressure. Her focused expression made it clear that this was just a passing thought. Julian asked if she thought he was the type to feel pressure. She said she knew he wasn't, then held up a dress to the camera, asking for his opinion. Julian glanced at it. It was an asymmetrical, neutral-tone dress in a reverse-season suede, exuding a retro-modern vibe. It was perfect for her. He asked about the occasion. Faye smiled and said she was going with Bruce to choose a wedding dress. Julian said it looked great. He didn't know who his biological father was, perhaps even Faye didn't, but he knew the line of men pursuing his mother was long. Bruce was a good man, worthy of her. Julian had no objections to her marrying. After getting his approval, Faye chatted for a few more minutes before rushing off to get her hair done. Julian returned to the sofa and resumed the movie. On screen, the protagonist's partner had been ambushed and lay in a pool of blood, riddled with bullets. The director's cinematography was beautiful, capturing the tragic heroism of the young, wounded officer. Julian found himself drawn into the scene, his wine glass forgotten. Just then, an email notification chimed. He glanced at his phone. It was from his assistant, Leo, with a list of potential models for the cover shoot. A message from Leo also popped up, saying he had selected 10 people and asking for Julian's review. As Julian was about to open the attachment, another message appeared. I put Liam's boyfriend at the end. During the meeting, Julian had realized Liam's relationship wasn't public and hadn't pressed the issue. He thought it had been dropped. He was surprised Leo had actually found the person. He opened the attachment and scrolled straight to the end. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. Who was Ashley? He had never seen this face before. He went through the file again. The person he was looking for wasn't there. He switched to his messaging app and called Leo. He asked where Liam's boyfriend was. Leo replied that he was at the end. He added that Julian must have good sources, knowing about a story that hadn't even broken yet. He had asked a friend, who confirmed that the two were about to make their relationship official. Julian was confused. He knew what he had seen at the Aura show. Liam's boyfriend was someone else entirely. And that person, he glanced back at the TV screen, where the young officer was still bleeding out. Julian returned to the movie's summary page. The actor's name was Caleb. Leo continued, saying he wasn't sure what Julian meant by expressive, but the people he had chosen all had good reputations in the fashion world and strong bodies of work. He admitted Ashley was a bit less experienced, but he trusted Julian's judgment. Julian cut him off, saying he was wrong. He knew that industry rumors were often a mix of truth and fiction. Leo had likely been misinformed. Since the relationship wasn't public, Julian wouldn't say more. He simply replied, I see, and ended the call. He reviewed the other candidates. He immediately dismissed Ashley. It had nothing to do with her experience. She was a former idol with a ballet background and looked elegant in photos. But her features were classically delicate, not the style Julian was looking for. Among the others, there were a few who met his criteria. But every time he considered one, he would look up at the man on the TV screen and feel that something was still missing. After a long process of elimination, he still hadn't found what he wanted. He took a picture of the TV screen with his phone and sent it to Leo. Julian, I want him. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared for a long time before Leo sent a cautious reply. Leo, boss, who is he? Julian, Caleb. A while later, after presumably looking him up, Leo's tone became even more hesitant. Leo, can he be on our January cover? He doesn't seem to be very famous. Julian, I make the decisions. This time, Leo's reply was swift. Leo, I'll contact his agency right away. Leo was efficient. Before Julian had even arrived in the country, Leo had arranged the apartment rental, the car, and the furniture. Julian had settled in without any inconvenience. Contacting an agency was just a phone call. But before he heard back from Leo, Julian received a call from the building management. They informed him that his assigned parking spot was on the second basement level, not the first, and asked him to move his car. It only took a few minutes. Julian went down in his loungewear, moved the car to the correct spot, and took the elevator back up to the 7th floor. Just as he arrived, Leo called back. The elevator doors behind him closed slowly, descending from the 7th floor to the 6th. Caleb, pulling a small suitcase, stepped into another elevator, idly scrolling through his phone. The message he had sent to Liam that afternoon had, as expected, gone unanswered. In fact, Liam had been the first to message him, complaining that Stance had inexplicably dropped him from the cover. Caleb had been packing at the time and hadn't seen it immediately. By the time he replied asking why, Liam was no longer responding. It seemed to be a pattern for them, their conversations always out of sync. The apartment building's parking garage was spacious, filled with luxury cars that made Caleb's modest sedan look out of place. The Apex was one of the most private and exclusive residences in the city, home to many socialites. Liam had only moved in this year after his income skyrocketed. But he was always busy, so Caleb ended up spending more time here than he did. He drove out of the garage and merged into the flow of traffic. The timing was perfect to head to the film studio complex in the suburbs. He could check into a hotel, get a night's sleep, and be ready for his scenes early the next morning. The show, a government-sponsored legal drama, had Caleb in 8 episodes, but his scenes were scattered. He had already filmed the parts where his character sought legal help to get his unpaid wages. Today, he was filming the scene where, realizing the lawyer was useless, he takes a hammer and confronts the project manager himself. He was in makeup by 6 in the morning and waited until nearly noon for the lead actors to finish their scenes. Caleb was used to it, always staying ready. So when the director signaled for him to start, he slipped into character instantly. The scene was intense. "When are you going to pay us? Do you think you can just walk all over us?" Caleb had actually worked on a construction site. He knew the frustration of being underpaid and the anger that came with it. He channeled that feeling into his performance. After the scene wrapped, the veteran actor playing opposite him joked that he was genuinely afraid Caleb was going to hit him with the hammer. Caleb assured him he wouldn't and checked to make sure the actor hadn't been accidentally hurt. The older man praised his performance, saying he really made him feel like he owed him money. They were both minor characters, and no one paid them any mind as they chatted in a corner of the set. But Caleb soon noticed that the atmosphere on set was unusual today. The crew, normally focused on their individual tasks, were gathered in small groups, whispering. The young script supervisor, usually quiet and reserved, was now animatedly on a video call with someone. She was holding her phone up high, clearly not filming herself. Caleb instinctively followed the direction of her camera and saw him. Julian. Caleb's first thought was that he was seeing things. But Julian was too striking to be mistaken, especially in the chaotic environment of a film set. He stood there alone, looking like a god who had accidentally wandered into the mortal realm. Julian was obviously looking for someone. His gaze swept across the area and finally landed on Caleb. He beckoned to him. The situation felt surreal. Caleb looked to his left, then to his right, and pointed a tentative finger at himself. Julian nodded and then tilted his head, motioning for Caleb to follow him. Everyone on set was now staring curiously at Caleb. He, too, was bewildered but followed Julian to an empty space outside the soundstage. "Hello, I'm Julian," he said, his English as perfect and clear as it had been that night at the party. He handed Caleb a business card. Consultant for Stance magazine. So he was the new consultant. Caleb took the card and asked what he wanted. The only reason Julian would come to find him in person was to invite him to be on the cover of Stance. He explained that his assistant had contacted Caleb's agent the previous night, but the agent had said Caleb wasn't interested in shooting for magazines and suggested they reconsider Liam. Julian had found it odd. An opportunity to be on the cover of Stance was huge exposure. It didn't make sense for Caleb to turn it down so flatly. But then he remembered the relationship between Caleb and Liam and understood. Liam had been the original choice. It wouldn't look good to steal a project from his own boyfriend. So, before trying to persuade him, Julian wanted to confirm his theory. He asked directly, "Did you turn me down because of your boyfriend?" His expression was neutral, his tone direct. But Caleb looked at him with utter confusion. He hadn't received any call from his agent. He had antagonized the head of his agency and had consistently refused to apologize. As a result, just as his career was about to take off, the company had shelved him. Any good opportunities were intercepted by the agency. They never even reached him. Strictly speaking, his being on this set today was an unsanctioned job. It was only because Zoe didn't want to see him starve that she turned a blind eye. So Caleb had no idea what had happened behind the scenes. He could only interpret Julian's question from his own perspective. "Did you turn me down because of your boyfriend?" Had his memory of Fashion Week failed him? Had he done more than just borrow a light from Julian? That seemed impossible. Realizing he must be missing some crucial information, Caleb asked, "I turned you down?" For the cover shoot, Julian clarified. "Your agent said you weren't interested." Though still confused, Caleb quickly put the pieces together. Zoe must have rejected the offer on his behalf. But that wasn't the main point. "What cover?" he asked. Julian, watching him closely, tilted his head slightly. "The January cover of Stance." "Did your agent not tell you?" Caleb was stunned. Him on the January cover of Stance? It sounded like a fantasy. Connecting Liam being dropped with Julian's new role as consultant, a strange thought crossed his mind. Was Julian some kind of vigilante for gossip, wanting to enact justice after overhearing their fight by replacing Liam with him? That was even more fantastical. He told Julian that he understood magazines like Stance. He used the general term, being unfamiliar with the fashion world, were very selective. Julian confirmed they were. He also understood now that Caleb had never received his invitation. He explained that he didn't usually approach people personally. If it had been any other newcomer to the fashion world, receiving such a direct endorsement from Julian would have sent them into a frenzy of excitement. But Caleb's expression remained placid. He was like someone with no interest in martial arts who is suddenly told by a grandmaster that he has a rare talent and will be taught a legendary technique. It didn't elicit much of a reaction. Caleb stated that he didn't seem to fit their criteria. He had no major CRS or accolades. Putting him on the January cover would only cheapen the magazine. Julian's reply was simple. "You fit my criteria. And right now, at Stance, I make the decisions." It sounded like a line from an over-the-top drama. Although Zoe hadn't consulted him, Caleb would have refused anyway. Firstly, he was self-aware enough to know he wasn't qualified. And even if Julian was trying to shake things up with his casting choices, Caleb had no interest in being the test case. He knew that if he appeared on the cover, it would inevitably stir up controversy. Secondly, Julian was right. Caleb did have to consider Liam. They were still a couple. If he really did take Liam's cover, he couldn't imagine the fit his proud boyfriend would throw. Caleb was formulating a polite refusal when two extras walked past. One of them, looking at his phone, stopped dead in his tracks and exclaimed, "Holy shit, Liam just came out." The other rushed over, asking where. The first one said it was all over social media, that it was trending. A knot tightened in Caleb's stomach. He quickly pulled out his phone and opened the social media app. The top trending topic was indeed about Liam, but the words didn't make any sense to him. Liam and Ashley announced relationship. Caleb's grip on his phone tightened. He was about to click on the topic when a shadow fell over the screen. A clean, crisp scent filled the air. Julian had leaned in close, their shoulders touching, to look at his phone. Caleb was 6 feet tall. When he looked over, his gaze fell directly on Julian, who was looking down at his screen. Perhaps sensing Caleb's stare, Julian looked up and explained, "I don't have this app on my phone." The unspoken message was clear. "Let me see yours." Caleb was in no mood to argue about personal space. He let Julian watch as he clicked on the trending topic. He had expected some paparazzi scoop. Instead, it was Liam himself who had reposted Ashley's declaration of love, adding a heart emoji. Caleb stood there silently, his knuckles white as he clutched his phone. Beside him, Julian summed up the situation in his precise, clear English. "Your boyfriend just went public with someone else." Caleb didn't need the reminder. He swiped up, closing the app. There were no new messages on his phone. It was then that his heart sank completely. Liam was obsessed with his public image. He was what people called chronically online. It was impossible that he didn't know this was trending. No, he definitely knew. He had reposted it himself. Yet he offered Caleb no explanation. If there had been some unavoidable reason, he could have sent a quick message. But his phone remained silent. Caleb suddenly remembered the flight back, how Liam had stepped out of the lounge to talk to Zoe, deliberately hiding the conversation from him. Was this what they had been discussing? Caleb couldn't think of any reason to hide it from him, unless something had actually happened between Liam and Ashley. With a gossip-hungry deity still standing beside him, Caleb tried to mask his emotions. He suppressed the turmoil in his eyes and retracted his intended refusal. He took out his cigarette pack, offered one to Julian, and asked if he smoked. Julian glanced at the brand, took the cigarette, and this time it was Caleb who lit it for him. The open space was windy. Caleb cupped his hands around the flame. As Julian leaned in, his fingertips almost brushed against Julian's chin. They both exhaled smoke at the same time. Caleb turned his head away. The bruise makeup on his cheekbone was still visible. Julian, holding the cigarette between his lips, looked at the fake bruise. He pulled a handkerchief from his jacket pocket and offered it to Caleb, gesturing for him to wipe his face. Only then did Caleb remember he was still in makeup from the scene where he had gotten into a fight. He probably looked a mess. But a handkerchief? It would just get dirty. Caleb wasn't that fastidious. He simply wiped the special effects makeup off his cheek with the back of his hand. Why me for the cover? The smoke he exhaled was blown back into his face. He squinted at Julian. Don't tell me it was love at first sight at Fashion Week. Julian's eyes glinted with interest. He suddenly noticed a shift in Caleb's demeanor. Before, they had maintained a polite distance, their conversation strictly professional. Now, Caleb seemed to have shed all social niceties, speaking his mind with a raw, unfiltered carelessness. "No," Julian said, a corner of his mouth lifting in a look of mock regret. "If it had been love at first sight, I would have stayed for another cigarette." Caleb had been speaking casually, so the answer didn't surprise him. He pressed on, asking for the real reason. "I watched your movie, Crimson Ashes, last night. The scene where you die left a deep impression on me." Julian had watched it several times. "For the January cover, I want a subtle element of violence. The way you looked in that scene perfectly embodies the kind of violent aesthetic I'm going for. If you do the shoot, I can make you look very sexy." He paused, then added, "The shoot might be a little revealing, but I'll handle it with care." Crimson Ashes. Caleb's mind drifted. It was the film where both he and Liam had made their debut. Liam had played the younger version of the protagonist, and Caleb had played his partner who dies tragically. Neither had much screen time, At the time, Caleb was a senior in film school, and Liam was a handsome amateur scouted off the street. They had met on set, bonded over their shared aspirations, and naturally fell into a relationship. In Crimson Ashes, Caleb's performance had been the more memorable one. In his death scene, he was slumped against a pile of rubble, his prominent Adam's apple spattered with blood. A film blogger had screenshotted the image, captioning it, "Can someone let me lick the blood off his neck?" The post went viral. Though the film's publicity team had helped push it, Caleb had genuinely gained a surge of popularity from it. But with that came trouble. The head of his agency, Mr. Weiss, had invited him to dinner alone. During the meal, he had made it clear he wanted to be his patron and had reached out to touch Caleb's throat. Caleb had responded by dumping a plate of food on his head. After that, he was blacklisted by the company. He had never told Liam the real reason he was being sidelined. Liam had always assumed it was because he had refused to appear on a cheesy comedy show the company had arranged for him, thus offending Mr. Weiss. In reality, the comedy show was already part of Mr.
Weiss' Retaliation.
Naturally, Caleb had refused. At first, he had considered breaking his contract. But faced with a crippling penalty fee, he had no choice but to endure it. And as time went on, he grew resigned. His once lofty ambitions dwindled to a simple hope of being able to act. Though the company ignored him, he was at least free to choose the roles he did get, which was some consolation. 3 years of his 5-year contract had passed. During the first year, he and Liam had shared a period of simple happiness. But as Liam got busier, they spent most of their time apart. Just like now, his boyfriend had just publicly announced a relationship with someone else, and Caleb didn't even know where he was. His phone in his pocket remained silent. His wandering gaze was suddenly intercepted by a captivating face. Julian tilted his head, blocking Caleb's view. "Are you spacing out?" he asked. Caleb snapped back to the present. He stubbed out his cigarette on a nearby trash can and brought the conversation back to the cover shoot. "How do you want to shoot it?" He pretended he hadn't been zoning out, recalling Julian's mention of it being revealing. "Naked?" Julian raised an eyebrow. He looked at Caleb and said, "If that's what you want, I can make it happen." "Fine, let's do it," Caleb said distractedly. "Is there anything else?" Julian wasn't sure if he was imagining it, but it felt like Caleb was trying to get rid of him. But they had covered everything that needed to be discussed. He took out his phone. "Let's exchange numbers." After Julian left, Caleb went to a sink and splashed water on his face. The cold water washed away the painted-on wounds but couldn't erase the storm cloud from his features. 30 minutes had passed since the news broke, and still not a word from Liam. Caleb had no desire to reach out to him. He felt he had been accommodating enough in their relationship, always the one to compromise. Was he now expected to patiently ask for an explanation? Shouldn't Liam be the one to offer it? Perhaps the silence meant there was nothing to explain. His phone buzzed with an incoming call. The only person who ever called him was Liam. He quickly pulled it out, but was surprised to see Julian's name on the screen. He answered, confused. "Hello? Where's the parking lot?" Julian's unhurried voice came through the phone. "I'm lost." In the end, Caleb found Julian at the entrance to the historical film set area. The area was active with filming, and most of the people wandering around were extras in period costumes. Julian, dressed head to toe in designer streetwear, stood out like a sore thumb, looking like a glitch in a historical drama. "Couldn't you ask for directions?" Caleb asked as he approached. "I asked 2 people," Julian said. "They pointed me in 2 different directions. That was because there were 2 different parking lots." Based on Julian's vague description, Caleb led him to the right one. Julian's car was a bright red sports car. Caleb felt like he had seen it recently but couldn't place it. "Give me your phone," Caleb said, holding out his hand as they were about to part ways. It was a bold request. They had only met twice, and the first time barely counted. They were little more than strangers. Even with Liam, Caleb had never made such a demand. Julian didn't ask why. He unlocked his phone with his face and handed it to Caleb. Caleb opened the App Store and downloaded a navigation app. "Next time, use this." Julian watched him. "Okay," he said. The download finished quickly. Caleb handed the phone back, but Julian kept his hands in his pockets, making no move to take it. "Download the social media app for me too," he said. He met Caleb's patient, polite smile. "Of course, Your Highness." Julian asked with amusement, "What did you call me?" "A prince," Caleb replied. "High maintenance." "My English isn't perfect," Julian said, "but it sounds like you're calling me a pain." Caleb was impressed. "Your English is excellent," he said, which was his way of admitting that yes, he found him a pain. Julian, used to being admired, seemed to find being so openly called out for his behavior refreshing. Despite his grumbling, Caleb downloaded the app and registered a new account for Julian using his phone number. After setting the username to Julian's name, he said, "You can change the profile picture yourself later." Changing the profile picture would mean opening the photo gallery, a very private space. Caleb had no interest in prying. But Julian didn't seem to care. "You can just do it for me. Pick anyone." Caleb's finger moved, and the app's photo gallery preview popped up. He paused. The most recent photo in Julian's gallery was a picture of Caleb's iconic scene from Crimson Ashes. It was a casual shot, taken directly from a TV screen, clearly not for collection. It confirmed what Julian had said earlier. This was the look he was after. The second photo was a bird's-eye view of the city, beautifully composed and colored. It was clearly the work of a skilled photographer. From the familiar buildings, Caleb guessed Julian had taken it from his new office. He used that photo for the profile picture and handed the phone back to Julian. "Done." Julian still didn't take it. "Follow your account for me." This time, Caleb didn't indulge his prince. He held up his hand, gesturing for him to take the phone back. People online are relentless detectives. Don't go around following people randomly. Julian took the phone, said okay, then found Caleb's account in the search bar. 520,000 followers. "Is this you?" Caleb watched in dismay as Julian hit the follow button. Julian drove as flamboyantly as he lived. Long after he was gone, Caleb could still hear the roar of his engine. His own phone remained silent. After being ignored by Liam for so long, Caleb no longer felt the initial need for an explanation. He had swung to the opposite extreme. Even if Liam were to call now, he couldn't be bothered to listen. A notification popped up on his phone. It was Julian. "Julian. Following me?" "Caleb, as if I have the time." "Julian. Don't text and drive." "Caleb, I'm at a red light." After that light, Julian noticeably slowed down, sometimes even falling behind Caleb, as if to say, "Let's see how long you follow me." The two cars continued, one after the other, until they both turned into the driveway of the Apex. It was only then that Caleb remembered why the red sports car looked so familiar. He had seen it in the underground garage before. It wasn't a huge surprise. The building was known for its security and was home to many celebrities. It made sense that Julian would choose to live here. The two cars parked on the second basement level, separated only by a few dozen feet and a couple of concrete pillars. Julian seemed more surprised than Caleb. "You live here too?" Not for much longer, Caleb said. They entered the same building and pressed buttons for the 6th and 7th floors. The building had 1 apartment per floor. Caleb instantly understood. The person who had been blasting opera from the apartment above him lately was Julian. "Why are you leaving?" Julian asked. The apartment was rented in Liam's name. Caleb had already found a new place and packed his things. The photo shoot had delayed his move by a couple of days. He was only back to get his belongings. Julian asked where he was moving. "Somewhere close to the film studios," Caleb replied. Julian seemed thoughtful. "The suburbs?" "Yeah. Doesn't seem very convenient." "It's cheap." The rent was less than 1/10 of what it cost to live at the Apex. Julian was quiet for a moment, as if he was just now realizing that Caleb was a struggling, unknown actor. "So your company—" A ding from the elevator announced its arrival at the 6th floor, cutting Julian off. "This is me," Caleb said, stepping out of the elevator. Julian didn't press him, only saying, "Remember to come by in a couple of days to look at the photos." Caleb agreed. His new apartment was in a 20-year-old building. It was a 1-bedroom that he rented for a fraction of his old place, well within his budget. The neighborhood was full of supermarkets and restaurants, and though public transport wasn't great, he had a car. After unpacking, he went out to buy some necessities and had dinner at a noodle shop. He confirmed one thing: no one recognized him. Being mentioned by Julian had put him in the online spotlight twice, but in the real world, no one cared. Most of the people who followed celebrity news were young. A few younger people on the street gave him a second glance, but it was the familiar look of someone seeing a handsome stranger, not someone they recognized. Or if they did, they wouldn't believe a celebrity would just be walking down the street. Caleb was relieved. He still had 2 years left on his contract where he couldn't openly take on acting jobs. If he became too recognizable, it would be difficult to find other work to make ends meet. He might actually starve. The following week, Caleb left early for his meeting and got stuck in traffic for 2 hours. He arrived at the stance office just in time. The Orange Chief, Wendy Chun, personally greeted him and led him into the conference room. Julian was already there, sitting at the table, looking through a stack of prints. He was wearing a pair of gold-rimmed glasses with a delicate chain, which made him look even more refined and intellectual than usual. Caleb couldn't tell if he actually needed them or if they were just for show. "All right, let's get right to it," Wendy said to Caleb. "We think these 2 photos are perfect for the cover and the inside fold-out." She pushed 2 sheets of paper across the table. One was a close-up of his upper body. He was lying in the shallow, sparkling water, a single blood-tinged pearl held between his lips. His brow was furrowed, his eyes half-closed in an expression of heartbreaking vulnerability. The other was a full-body shot. He was leaning against a rock, a massive fishtail extending from his body, elongating his form to create a surreal, ethereal figure. Caleb knew instantly why they had chosen these 2 photos. The close-up didn't reveal the tail, drawing the viewer's attention to his face. But when they opened the fold-out, the full, dramatic image would be revealed. However, Wendy paused. "We sent the photos to your agent a couple of days ago, and her feedback was that the pearl in your mouth could have negative connotations and might affect your ability to get future roles. She also felt the fishtail photo was too androgynous and could damage your image." So that was it. Julian must have anticipated his agent would cause trouble, which was why he had asked Caleb to come in person. "What do you think?" Julian asked, adjusting his glasses. There was no question that Stance had an impeccable eye. Caleb knew this set of photos was perfect for the cover.